Okay, welcome all. Thank you for this joint call between Sentient and EigenLayer, especially in the context of our AI partnership. But I thought first we should get started at a more um, gentle pace by just doing a bit of a background. I just did some very basic math, and I've known cumulatively Sreeram and Himanshu together for more than 25 years. Half my lifetime. Um, so, so it's such a pleasure to be here. Uh, Relations over 25 years are always special. Takes basically 25 years to build. No shortcuts there. And I remember meeting Sriram, meeting you and pitching blockchains in February, early February at the San Diego airport. So maybe you want to start with that, Sriram?
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably I think 2017. Pramod and I were collaborating on some AI project. In fact, let me just like switch from the story starts from there. So, after my PhD, which I did with Pramod, who was my PhD advisor, working on peer-to-peer wireless systems, moved on to work on genomics, and one of the big things that was happening in genomics was use of AI. And so I was starting to look into one of the particular problems that my group was working on in DNA sequencing, and using uh, mathematical methods to like solve to identify what the DNA sequence is based on the observed electrical current. And what we found is, as we were doing this, my student came and said, no, we should be really using AI to actually solve this problem. And and I was like, okay, it doesn't make sense. It actually has physics and mathematical models, and we should be using that. And the student went and did it anyway and beat our core benchmark, in a couple of weeks. His name is Ian Jiang. He's now actually at Sentient. And then I called Pramod and I'm like, okay, this is crazy. This should not be happening. And so we actually started a project on using AI to do a bunch of other things, including invent new algorithms for communication and so on. So then I was visiting Pramod with this context, and we were, I was particularly a little distraught that now this is 2017, right? Like people are talking a lot about AI, AGI, all this stuff right now, and already I was like, okay, it can do the one thing that I was doing, which is invent algorithms, and AI is now ready to do it. And this was a bit of like a jarring experience for me. And I was starting to think, okay, I'm starting to lose my job here. What should, what should I do? And fortuitously, Pramod mentioned to me that, hey, do you know this thing called blockchains? There's this thing called Bitcoin. The two problems in Bitcoin are about like throughput and latency. And my PhD was actually in peer-to-peer wireless systems, studying throughput and latency. And so it was kind of like a technically interesting thing. But even more broadly, the picture that if AI can kind of like do pretty much anything that we were doing, what is the one thing that it cannot do is to break things like cryptography and blockchains. And so we were kind of like interested in a technical angle, but also found that this is a kind of like a very strong counterfeit, actually like protecting against AI counterfeiting, as well as like taking a position in and working on a cool new technology which actually helps us in the AI era. So that's really how we got into blockchain. Pramod was parallelly working on using AI in NLP and all kinds of other stuff at that time. And so we both got into blockchains, because of Pramod's prodding actually in around December 2017.
Yeah, thank you for the context, Sriram. Himanshu is here. Um, Welcome, Himanshu. And I was just moderating on your behalf. Um, I guess I pitched blockchain to Himanshu around just around COVID time. We're all at home and pitching a way to connect wireless networks, naturally peer to peer. And spectrum is local. Definitely transmissions are local. fits naturally with ownership rights and blockchains. So Himanshu, do you want to start with that?
Hi everyone. Sorry, I struggle with this thing every time. Every time I go to spaces, there's some jinx and something happens. But looks like not too late. So my name is Himanshu Tyagi. I'm one of the co-founders of Sentient, and it's my privilege to be a part of this chat with both Sriram and Pramod. Uh, in fact, Pramod, even before that, I think 2017 or 2018, we had an early chat around the snark paper, and you reached out to me and saying that this is what you're trying to do on blockchains, and would you like to go and discuss this paper and go over it? And of course, this is like we coming from the other end of the blockchains and going deep into the technical discussion right up. But yeah, like it has been a great experience so far, and jumping right at the heart of crypto because of what we discussed, and then later what EigenLayer was doing has been awesome. So it's great to see all the people here. I think we have already introduced everyone. Shriram,
Yeah, sounds good.
you don't need any introduction, but
No, no,
just for
we're just
completeness.
talking about how we
I
got
mean,
into
it should
crypto.
not become a episode of Between Friends, right? So yeah, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hey, hi everybody. I'm Sriram. I started the EigenLayer project. At EigenLayer, one of our vision is to provide trust for general purpose computation. How do you build, autonomous, verifiable computation? How do we provide trust for the autonomy and verifiability of arbitrary services? So some people ask me, like, what does EigenLayer have anything to do with AI? And like, there's a long history. Like, I was just talking a little bit about some of the early history of how we even got into crypto is we were doing AI. Actually, one of my fortunate to work with one of my co-authors last year won a Nobel Prize in chemistry for using AI for protein folding. David Baker at the University of Washington. But the story for why AI is relevant to EigenLayer is trust for off-chain computation. And what is the off-chain computation that people are most interested in is something related to AI. So obviously there is, if we can provide trust for, AI computations, that's a pretty natural fit. It's in some sense the same way that any cloud today is investing a lot in AI because, what is the cloud computation that people are most interested in is AI. And so, for example, Microsoft Azure is investing $80 billion this year in AI. And it's kind of like pretty natural because where is the demand for computation coming from? And from our viewpoint, we are a platform for autonomous, verifiable computation. Where is the demand for computation coming from? Coming from AI. So that's the natural fit of how EigenLayer is related to AI on a kind of broad basis. I used to be a
Great.
professor at the University of Washington before I started EigenLayer 3.5 years back. So excited to be here, know this group of people for quite some time, as Pramod mentioned.
Great, great. So if you are in the business of building trust-free, verifiable compute, then you must be working on AI because that's where all the compute is going. That's where that's what EigenLayer is doing in AI. Pramod, would you like to share your perspective on, and which I know well, but I won't. It will be great to hear from you. Your perspective on how you see AI as one of the key, or maybe the most important application for crypto. You have spoken to me about this so many times. Would you like to share some thoughts on that?
Yes, thank you, Himanshu. My name is Pramod Viswanath. I'm a professor at Princeton University, and it's my privilege to have had students like Himanshu and Sriram. Thank you for this. One thing about, I mean, we live in an era where the technology is changing so fast. I mean, just in my own career, during my PhD times at Berkeley, the internet was happening. So I've been a Web 1 guy to Web 2 to Web 3, and along the way, the wireless revolution, which, we're privileged to be part of. We went from imagine you can do email on your phone, that was our pitch to the first startup, all the way to having now obviously having phones and of course doing email and much, much more. We live in an era where technology changes a lot, but they're really at some infrastructure level where people can largely participate. And mostly Web 1 was about accessing information. Web 2 was a little bit of participating, a little bit, in the sense that you can upload your video on YouTube, you can upload some things on social media, but very minimal and hardly any monetization. I mean, all the monetization went to the platform companies. But AI is a technology which is much more integrated with people and individuals and the humans. We already hear of one person startup together with AI and things like that. And this is the era of what I call sort of AI entrepreneurship, which is native and as a technology, AI is very special this way. It enables individuals with ideas and entrepreneurship and energy. At the same time, it also allows you to scale up without having to have a substantial amount of ecosystem around you. I mean, anyone who's sort of here done startups, you understand what this ecosystem I'm alluding to. And what I'm most excited about AI is this connection of enabling individuals, humans, and empowering them way beyond any other sort of technology you could do. In other words, you actually can do things and interact directly with the market that other technologies were merely pipes or at best rent seeking in the middle. And this is the connection to crypto, so native that you want people to be enabled. And this as a AI as a technology is special that way. And this excites me the most.
Right. So the fact that crypto enables this kind of people coordination and AI is a technology through which now people will connect with all the knowledge of each other and all the information collected is what connects AI to crypto. Is that the right summary, Pramod?
Yeah, I mean, we want consensus of intelligences. Consensus of knowledge, I think, is or just consensus of information is the first step. That is called blockchain. Information, just the most basic form of information is just bits, and a ordered sequence of bits. That's just the ledger. That's blockchain. And what we are looking for, the next one is consensus on knowledge and our values. And this is where individuals and communities come together. And then I'm talking about consensus on intelligences, which is how actually intelligence was born, natural intelligence, human intelligence. Evolution put basic building blocks, hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, and put them under evolutionary pressures, both short term, eat and not be eaten, and long term, which is to procreate and spread your genes. And out came intelligence and out came humans from this pressure. So a natural consensus on intelligence is a natural sort of a way in which AGI will be born and managed by communities that create and interact with these intelligences. We are only in the beginning stage
Great.
of this roadmap.
Yeah, yeah. So there is this huge thing happening. All of us are a part of it. We see every day something or other major is moving, and crypto needs to get behind it. All the all the different crypto projects definitely will have a thing around it, and people are working on different parts of the stack, and people are working in different type of applications. Maybe I can add from what Sentient is doing there. Sentient is a model company. We want to look at the brain of the AI, the model, and one thing is that today all the models that you see around are, even if when they are open, are sort of governed by very narrow small groups, and are this governance is what kind of preferences are put down in the model and what kind of alignments are put down in the model. What Sentient wants to enable is these models which are governed by communities, and we strongly believe that there'll be this sort of convergence to so-called singularity of intelligence, but that singular intelligence will not be delivered as a singular intelligence. There'll be a plurality of preferences. Different people, different builders, different use cases, different communities, different countries want a different form of that model. So we are in the business of building that models and having those communities govern those models, own those models as tokens, and govern the future of those models. And the announcement today is for one such model, which we are building together with the EigenLayer community, and we're very excited about it. I would like to again invite Sriram to talk about what is maybe you can talk about what is this model we are building, what's the motivation behind it. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'll start with a short preface on what led us to this path. Um, when you think about what is the thesis for blockchains? So we have like a very um, clear first principle thesis for what I think blockchains should be. And in fact, like Eigen Labs, are the company behind EigenLayer, our vision is to build humanity's coordination engine. And why do we say that? Coordination, when you want N people to coordinate, you need a mechanism for them to communicate, and that's the internet. Communication is a necessary part of it, but it's not sufficient. To build a coordination mechanism, you need the ability for people to communicate with each other and make commitments, right? Commitments with each other. And so for example, a smart contract is a great example of like a commitment. Hey, I put in this money, you put in this money. If X, if Trump wins this election, then I'll pay you this much, and if he doesn't, then I'll pay you that much, right? So this is an example of a contract that you can enter, and so really, and a contract is a mechanism for binding commitments, right? And these commitments are unlike other forms of commitments which require either a trusted intermediary to enforce it or some legal system to enforce it. These commitments are actually self-enforcing. And so when you think about commitments that are self-enforcing, right now crypto can make, or just think of the scope of what contracts can be expressed on chain. You see that only contracts can be expressed on chain for which like the facts are objectively verifiable on chain. So one of the things we observed at EigenLayer is this is insufficient, even to do the thing that I just said, which is, for example, how do you know who is the president of the United States? This fact is not accessible to a blockchain, and this is called the Oracle problem. And so a lot of our earlier work around the Eigen token, as an example, was how do you bring facts that are socially well known? You can call these social truths. How do you bring social truth on chain? And so we had this whole new paradigm called intersubjective, uh, staking, forking, all of that, which was basically designed around that. So you can say that's an expansion. So once you solve that problem, I'm not going to talk about how we solve it today, but once you solve that problem, you now have access to social truth on chain. But then, as we were trying to think a bit more about what sets of things are needed to actually express general purpose contracts on chain, the thing that you run into is actually like maybe I can code an episode. Just before I joined, entered into crypto in 2016, Nobel Memorial Prize in Economics went to Oliver Hart at Harvard. Oliver Hart was won the Nobel Prize for contract theory. And so somebody went and accosted him and asked him, "Hey, you're working on contract theory, and this is 2016, right? Early Ethereum times." So said, "Oh, there's this thing called Ethereums. You can do general smart contracts. How does this affect contract theory?" And Oliver Hart said, yeah, contracts are on-chain or using a blockchain to enforce contracts is great, but it can only be done for extremely binary, extremely objective claims. Most of contract theory, on the other hand, that I worked on, Oliver Hart, the Nobel Prize winner, worked on, is on the gray area. It's about good reason, good faith, you know, uh, uh, all kinds of things. To the best of my knowledge, to reasonable effort, all these different quantifiers that we use to actually maintain and run social coordination systems. So, and what he pointed out was blockchains have no role or no possibility of solving these because this is a pretty complex adjudication and problem. And so this was always nagging me from the back of my mind that I can't enter into an arbitrary contract with a counterparty on a blockchain because there is no on-chain adjudication mechanism. And so this is you can think of, going back to the categorization of what facts you can access on chain. You have objective truths that you can access on chain, and then with eigen token and eigen like forkability, what you can do is you can access intersubjective or social truth on chain. And now the question became, how can we access judicial facts on chain? how can you adjudicate on chain? And this was kind of like the motivation for, can you actually build an AI that can do complex adjudication to solve, to take facts and then like provide adjudication on, verifiably on chain. So that's the direction that we had been working on. And what we found as we were working on it is, you can start trying to build these kind of like adjudication things using existing models and building agents on top of it, which is what we had been doing. And as we were doing this thing, we found firstly that there are some extraordinary advantages for AI based adjudication. The first one is it's replicable, right? You ask a panel of judges to go adjudicate something, and then like you ask another panel, you'll get a different answer. You ask the same panel, can you replicate it? It's not easy to even, the same panel you ask on a different day, you may get a different answer. Conviction rates before and after lunch are different. So you have like all kinds of human biases that operate on adjudication. Whereas with an AI-based model, you can control the input data field, you can control you can replicate and verify that they actually did what they said they did. So in AI as a mechanism for adjudication became very attractive. So what we had been working on internally at Eigen is actually, can we build AI agents and other things that can actually perform the task of adjudication? You can even set up a courtroom with many agents, like the jury, many different people. You can have a judge, you can have a prosecutor, you can have a defendant, and all these people argue, and out of that emerges kind of like the adjudicated output. So, but the one thing as we were trying to build this, we found was existing models are not well suited for this task. The reason they're not well suited is they were not built for adjudication. So why would they be good at adjudication? They were built for pleasing a listener in a chatbot interaction. That's what existing models are built for. So, they do well at the task that they're built for. So the question became, what if we could actually think of and build a new model for this purpose? And of course, that's far out of our current expertise. And it turns out there's a company called Sentient, whose specializes in building models which preserve, which follow, which a certain group of values and are aligned to those values. And the question became, can we actually build a model who's aligned to the value of justice, who's aligned to the value of follow what is written in the contract and enforce it, rather than having a priori moral ideals and other things that occlude their clear, decisive action. So that's the kind of origin story of this project. I'm very, very excited that we are able to bring this really powerful partnership. It's a team building cutting edge models that can be aligned towards arbitrary goals. What we're doing is taking that and putting it to task on what is arguably the central problem of human civilization: adjudication is the central powerhouse through which we can enter into free contracts as free individuals, because that they will be resolved according to the rules. And smart contracts gave a huge upgrade on it, but are restricted to like very tight black and white statements. And what this adjudication can do is to expand it massively beyond the current scope. So yeah, with that long prelude, I'll hand it back to Himanshu to speak a little bit about how tuning to the different values and loyalty works with the sentient models.
Oh man, that's such a great pitch. And the point is that this stuff, which sounds completely crazy, completely sci-fi, is happening at the speed and is happening now. Is that's the part which I find very exciting. So just to bring some simple examples out of it, right? Which I really like. And Sriram and Pramod generally are talking about a much broader problem. But imagine all these governance discussions that are happening around all your, let's say, improvement proposals, some dispute resolutions which have gone, forking discussions which happen on social media. And then at the end, what happens out of it is something uh, a bit vague, and it's settled somewhere. Imagine taking all that discussion and feeding it into a model and training that model to take those calls. And suddenly these calls are being taken by software instead of human. That's the power of models. That's the power of LLM. That subjective things can be now decided by software. That's the new agency that you have given, right? That the software always has some agency. Automation always had some agency. The new agency that we talk about, these agents, these have agency. That new agency is the subjective decision making on behalf of humans and human thought process. It's very exciting, and this kind of thing will, I think, it will make impact not only in crypto and beyond, in general company law and dispute resolution. Pramod, from you, would you like to add on what kind of data do you think will go into this, and what kind of techniques will go into this? Ah, it seems Pramod is muted.
Okay, sorry about that. First, I wanted to, before I get into the nitties of how to achieve this, I first want to maybe one step above, which is to say, what are the challenges in making an adjudicator, a judge model happen? I would say there are two challenges. First is, especially from crypto audience would understand this right away, is guardrails. You use existing models to build a judge around it, let's say even fine tune or some version of it. Well, first of all, there are guardrails. You try to ask, how do I talk? How do I set up a DAO? You even ask simple questions like, which one should I trade? I mean, these LLMs have guardrails. They will not talk about financial advice or governance around anything, definitely around crypto, but more generally, they have guardrails. So just guardrails allow them to just stop them from doing anything interesting. Number two is that LLMs are built to hallucinate. They're largely creative processes. And the last thing you want from a judge or a judicial aspect is creativity. You want to interpret the law as it is and come up with a judgment. Creativity, hallucination, and just making up things along the fly is exactly the opposite. And you can see you can see this in a very concrete context. You ask LLM, should I go, uh, A or B or Super Bowl, Kansas or Philly? I mean, you can just pick some things, or by Trump or Biden. It'll try to have it both ways. It'll never make a decision. It's non-committal, and it's kind of part of how the alignment or training of all these LLMs. I don't know how it became such a common thing, but no LLM is committal. So I would say these are sort of two basic ones, which is first, there are some guardrails that prevent you from doing anything interesting, remotely interesting like adjudication. Second, they're not even committal to begin with. They're creative processes. And so first step, these are the two main challenges to start addressing. And one can try to do them maybe by putting prompts or prompt wrappers. Ask GPT explicitly, hey, you have to make a call, and you'll see that it'll resist. It's just the very nature of how it's been aligned to take both sides. And for every prompt, there is always a counter way of getting around it. So, which is why we decided we have to build a model itself. In other words, in the DNA itself. So, adjudication, the ability to commit, the ability to interpret without having to have hallucinations in a deterministic manner, while dealing with natural language and the subjectivity that comes with it. So we wanted to put in the DNA itself of the AI, which means getting into the model. And these are the challenges we want to address here. And then maybe
Excellent.
we can go over like how we might want to solve it, what kind of data will we get, what is, and we have something very concrete that we are building, so we can get into it. Because adjudication of all kinds of, we said loyal to justice. That sounds like, from Hammurabi to today, all kinds of justice models and constitutions are available. But we are building something fairly concrete and specific and of immense value, the first order value. So we can get into that.
Right, right. But just it took my mind somewhere else, and I would like to open that discussion. When we think of law, we think of something as very absolute and okay, black and white. And Shriram alluded to this when he was talking. But it turns out that this subjectivity and sort of randomness in law is much more than what you think. And there have been a lot of studies on this, right? Like there is a lot of noise in human decision making, no matter how high the stakes are. And in fact, one can argue that bringing it to a piece of software like a model will still have some hallucination related subjectivity left in it, but it's controllable and it is predictable in the sense of the noise is predictable. Shriram, what do you think about that? Do you think that this kind of hallucination will be sort of a big hindrance in bringing law to models?
A great question. It's like kind of foundational about AI, what AI can and cannot do. And what we are seeing already with things like reasoning models is basically, people were worried, like can you access mathematical truth and scientific facts using AIs, which are like pretty um, hallucinatory. And turns out by doing a bunch of things, including things like letting AI take both sides of the same thing and using that to go through the reasoning, thinking about like the pros and cons. And even humans suffer this thing called selective recall, right? So if you ask, oh, tell me all the ways in which somebody was really awesome, and then you'll recall all those things. But when you think about like, well, tell me all the ways in which somebody was really bad, then you'll also think about all those things. So, and of course, depending on the state of the mind, you might choose to access one or the other. And so these AI models are not that different from humans. And when people say, "Oh, it hallucinates a lot," humans hallucinate a lot too. Like we have selective recall. Himanshu just pointed out, even in justice system where people are highly trained, and law is, so to say, in their own DNA, because they've been trained and thinking about it every day of their life for like 40, 50 years. Even then, all kinds of other biases creep in. So the bar should not be some kind of absolute standard that, oh, this is much better than, this is just ideal, but it should just be better than existing systems. And one thing we observed, actually what happened was, in this justice, AI-based justice thing, one of our senior individual contributors, a fellow at EigenLabs, Jamie Stevens, he was working on dispute resolution arbitration using AI. It's been a kind of like personal passion of his over several years. And he was thinking about like, how do we bring it to real world? And as I was thinking through this with him, it's much harder to replace humans with AI judges in the real world. Whereas in the crypto world, we have a core value. The core value is if it's on-chain and self-enforcing and programmatic, that is the set of systems that we can actually use. And right now, what is happening is because of the absence of any kind of on-chain justice system, what's happening is many things are simply like not even um, not even inside the scope of what like a smart contracts can do. And Himanshu was alluding earlier to things like DAOs, and I'll give an example, okay, which spoke to me quite a bit, kind of as a personal motivation. When you think about like a stock, right? A stock that you buy in a company, like Tesla or Meta or Google or whatever. So when you're buying a stock, you're holding a small percentage, right? Maybe it's 0.01% or something, a small percentage of the company's stock that somebody is buying, and that gives them that percentage of voting shares. But when a decision is made, a majority of stakeholders or shareholders can make any decision except, so the laws of various states where the companies are incorporated state that except they cannot make a decision which is adverse to minority shareholder interest. For example, a majority cannot print infinitely more shares and then just give it to the majority while not giving it to the minority. These kinds of things are extremely complicated and subjective to adjudicate because it's not programmatic to mention, for example, an allowed cost might be to print more shares to give it to the next CEO to actually whose job it is to scale the company 100x. That might be an okay, acceptable way of like distributing those shares. But just to enrich the first, uh, you know, the existing majority shareholders is an adverse thing which is not allowed according to the minority shareholder protection laws. There's no such thing in on-chain tokens and DAOs. Like imagine a token which is governed by a majority of the token holders, even purely on-chain, with purely on-chain governance, right? The majority of the token holders can dilute the minority of token holders arbitrarily. And this means there's no real protection for holding like a small percentage of any tokens, which is pretty bizarre, actually. So it's, and people say, why would you start a company in the real world? You can just start it on chain. But it's just simply nowhere near comparable today. But with these kinds of just on-chain programmatic enforcement, imagine a DAO where it says, hey, majority can do actions, but if somebody challenges it, it goes to this AI judge, and the judge will adjudicate whether it is adverse to minority shareholder, minority token holder interest or not. So you can actually build very sophisticated systems and get closer to actually building a much better system than what is there in the real world.
Great. Yeah, great answer. So the in fact, that small hallucination that is needed is actually a great tool to reason, and the subjectivity that will remain, so the subjectivity that will remain is needed. It's a feature. And one thing which Pramod brought out, and this is one thing I would like to highlight from sentient model side. To be a judge model, one has to have a consistent view and the ability to push back and take a stand in debates. That's very human. But if you see most of the AI models which are around, they are built to be sort of like a concierge, like at your service. And they're pushovers and they're supposed to change their opinion very quickly because their job is to please you, the user, and not really to take a stand and have this thing. This is one of the key human characteristics that this kind of models need to have. And this is one of the things that our first model, Dobby, which came out recently, is actually trained to be. Well, it's this conversation has been rather serious actually so far, and Dobby is something far from the tone of that model is very different from the tone of this conversation. You should, those of you who have tried it, know the profanity level is at the right place in that model, I think. But one thing remarkable about that model is that it takes a stand, and then if you push it back and it really believes in it, it goes double down into it. Okay, it's not like it cannot change its opinion, but it stands by it, and you can convince it after some argument that this is not true and this is what you should look at and look at facts. Of course this can be improved, but that's like sort of the foundation of that model. When one takes a stand like that and stands for it, it also depends on what values that model has. For example, Dobby is supposed to be pro freedom and pro crypto. What that means is that it comes with certain value system. That pro freedom means that sometimes freedom is conflicting with equality, and I mean it's a well-known trade-off that any free society is bound to be unequal overall eventually. And then most of the judgment and this decisions have to be taken by a model, and so model needs to have a very clear value system defined. So Dobby, for example, is pro freedom. What we want to do in future and what we will do in this partnership with EigenLayer is push these features further. We will look for what values need to be set out for this judge. We will look for what kind of human behavior a judge needs to have to be able to take those decisions. And that's where this model will evolve. And that's where we'll take this model. Pramod, would you like to add now on what goes into building such models which are human-like, and what are the kind of things that you guys are looking at on the research team?
Yeah, so now that we said we want to be loyal to justice, and I also pointed about the challenges, we would like to have somewhat of a narrower goal so that we can have a concrete model. And most of all, in AI, you measure the performance of the model through what is called a benchmark and associated evals. The performances are called evals. And there's no justice bench other than perhaps no, I mean, there's no such thing as a justice bench. And what we are trying to build is the first sort of governance benchmarks around which this set the gold standard around which governance decisions can be checked and verified. And we are taking a broad enough view of governance, at the same time, narrow enough that we can actually tackle within relatively short timescales. I mean, 3 months is the timescale in which a new model comes out by the big AI companies. So definitely we are looking at shorter timescale than 3 months. I mean, AI seems is works at a different resonant frequency. So we are looking at, say, let's say 6 to 8 weeks. And what we are looking at from a governance perspective are what you may think governance when your mind comes to it. If you're a crypto listener, then you think of DAOs. Yes, we will definitely have some classic examples from decision making around DAOs. We will also have regular corporate governance, C corporation, Delaware C corporation governance uh, cases. We will also have governance that are digitally native. Basically, our goal is sort of digitally native governance, and the DAO might look like digitally native, yes, but the biggest digitally native governance today is K-pop. It may not be kind of obvious to everyone that K-pop is, I mean, it's the first digitally native band, but governance is a key part, and they are very democratic systems with substantial voting and power at the grassroots, the fans. And we have been largely working away since we announced a week ago to putting together the benchmark, which sets what kind of cases we will study and adjudicate and how the answer should look like and associated data. And we're covering a variety of governance from corporate governance like C corporations to crypto governance like DAOs to digital band governance from K-pop.
Pramod, I think we're now this collaboration is. We need to learn K-pop to actually. I need to learn K-pop to keep up.
I don't know. My niece is into this Blackpink, so you can have some favorite bands, but it's fun. We are enjoying it.
Pramod, everyone's niece and daughters are into Blackpink.
I didn't know about this until I heard from my niece.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, K-pop decision making is one of the most interesting ones. One needs to go through that to see how complex decisions are taken. And this is very exciting how this model will come up. Now we are towards the end of the time of this thing. I'll quickly touch upon one thing you said, Pramod, governance by people, and I think some of the listeners here are actually owners of the Dobby model, which I view a model as an asset, and not only they governing it, they need to govern it because they also want to determine its future, and I yeah would would it will be great to see it will be great to get your thoughts, both Shriram and Pramod, on how do you think this governance, what can be done, how would the community participate in governance. In my own view, and what we just did recently, and this is just the beginning, is that this community which owns Dobby, the first version of Dobby, was given options to express their opinion through queries and through votes on what kind of alignment they would prefer on this first version of Dobby. And roughly everybody chose what is now called unhinged over a leashed alignment. And it's not just because of tone, but also because of how an unhinged model takes stand and how it behaves, how it's free flowing. This is just one example, initial activity to show how governance will work and how model will evolve. But are there sophisticated ways in which these models should evolve, in which community can participate? For example, Shriram, maybe you can start. And I had a thought on it. Is, for instance, instead of today, if you look at DAOs, I'm sticking with this DAO example, the governance is directly with humans who are subjective and they can vote and express their opinions after hearing all the discussions. Instead of giving humans that freedom, the freedom of human is a little bit taken down and delegated to the model, but they still have the freedom to update and govern the knowledge of the model. What do you think of that as a governance thing?
I think absolutely that's how it should work. Okay, so instead of phrasing it like actually taking away the freedoms of humans, I think of which is not the accurate thing. I think the accurate thing is that we make commitments to each other, right? So like I was mentioning earlier, we create coordination. Humans make coordination mechanisms, and which are able to make commitments to each other, but also commitments that collectives make to individuals. Okay, going back to the example of minority shareholder protection, this is a commitment. It's not that the majority's power is being, or to like arbitrarily mint shares to themselves is being taken away. It is that the power of the the collective is making a commitment to a minority token holder that, hey, your token cannot be diluted arbitrarily. And this commitment is being enforced, in a programmatic manner by this AI-based justice system. And you can ask, okay, you can say all you want about like what the AI-based justice system is, but the AI-based justice system is as good as the data that it is trained on. Which is what we've been talking about all along, is models are, different based on the objective function and the data that they've been trained on. And so the community needs to have a say in how the justice system is updated, how new data is trained. Those all need to have democratic expression. So the community will have a say in that. If it is deployed in the EigenLayer ecosystem, the Eigen community will have a say in how the models like values. Values are very nuanced, right? It's not just at the level of freedom versus justice versus something else, which is important, but at very, very fine-grained level, right? One of the things you see in large democratic societies is how the democratic process gives input into something like appoint a president, and the president appoints a Supreme Court judge, and so on. And that becomes the democratic input albeit at a very slow time scale into the justice system. And so you have something similar that you want to build in these systems where, there is a judge, but this judge is keeping on getting updated, one by case law, right? Case law as in previous cases that have happened. But if you just use by case law, any hallucination and erroneous outputs just get amplified over time. So you need an error correction process, which is actually what do the people think about it and how their inputs and feedback can be iterated to make this justice system better over time. So having them control, provide inputs, participate in, contribute to the training data and the objective functions of the system is, I think, the right time scale of participation.
Great, great. So we are towards the end. I'll just close here with the final thing. So all these models which come out of it, as you can see, the model we are talking about right now is sort of has far-reaching impact. And this model will be open source, will be available for you to look at, download, try. It will be owned by the community in the sense the community tokenized ownership will be the community and they will govern its future as it moves forward. And because of a model of this impact comes out, they'll be naturally activated to build on it, and the community gets to govern that whole future of that model and the use cases that come on that model. Very exciting future. Looking forward to building this and many more models from Sentient. And this collaboration with EigenLayer is the first one we are starting with, and it's the most exciting one so far. And yeah, any final concluding remarks, Pramod?
No, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Himanshu. Pramod. Really excited for this partnership. I think it's the first of many things that Eigen and Sentient will do together. But this by itself is is going to become something so core and obvious that in 10 years people will look back and say, I can't believe people thought blockchains only adjudicate on black and white things. So really excited for the kind of like fundamental transformation of blockchains that this could usher in.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all for
Bye.
listening.